Human and wildlife interactions within wilderness areas. The Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness was established in 1980. It is located within central Idaho and is made up of 4 different national forests totaling over 2 million acres. It is the second largest wilderness area within the lower 48 and is managed by a collaborative effort between the U.S. Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management. Rugged mountains, wild rivers, forests, and canyons, one of which is deeper than the Grand Canyon, define the terrain. Also found are numerous artifacts of the Shoshone and Nez Perce Indian tribes, along with remnants of frontier settlers. Wildlife like elk, mountain goats, bighorn sheep, mountain lions, and wolves call it home. The environmental components, aesthetic scenery, historic and prehistoric heritage of the area, as well as recreational opportunities available here, are why this wilderness area is protected, cherished, and utilized by all. Historically, wolves occupied the entire Intermountain West, but were overhunted and entirely extirpated by the 1930s. They had been absent for over 50 years before their return to the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness. The combination of Wilderness Act of 1964 and the federal listing of gray wolves, Canis lupus, as an endangered species has added additional responsibilities to wilderness managers. The wolf's return being highly controversial and requiring special management under the Endangered Species Act has complicated management even more. There are many stakeholders and they all want to be heard and accommodated. The Forest Service and BLM are responsible for managing the wilderness areas within the parameters of the Wilderness Act, as well as protecting species listed under the Endangered Species Act. Balancing stakeholder wants and needs with established laws and guidelines is a complicated and arduous process. Positive collaboration between all involved will ensure that responsible, educated decisions will be made to ensure the Frank Church Wilderness will remain for future generations of all species. The United States Forest Service and the Bureau of Land Management are stakeholders who manage the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness using the guidelines established within the Wilderness Act of 1964. They are responsible for many different variables, some of which are overseeing biological conditions, human impacts, and wildlife conflicts within the wilderness area. For wildlife agencies like the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, the Wildlife Management Institute, and the Wildlife Society, user impacts affect efforts in the protection and restoration of wildlife. These stakeholders conduct research and in some cases manage wolf populations that inhabit the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness. The Fish and Wildlife Service is specifically charged with the task of protecting and restoring populations of threatened or endangered species within the parameters laid out by the Endangered Species Act. As management strategies are planned and implemented, stakeholders such as concerned citizens groups, the Defenders of Wildlife, Western Watershed Project, and the Wilderness Watch like to get involved and contribute to the effort. The most important stakeholders are public, private, and commercial interests that share the wilderness area. Communities, recreationists, naturalists, hunters, and ranchers make up the majority of the public stakeholders. As human development and communities expand into habitat that was previously occupied by wildlife, interactions and conflict between the two increase. Human influence potentially threatens species recovery efforts. Issues will continuously rise as human population increases. As part of the Idaho Department of Fish and Game Wolf Management Plan, it is their goal to reduce conflict throughout the state, including wilderness areas. The general public, recreationists, and naturalists have concern for their safety from predators. Hunters view wolves as competition because of the year-round hunting habits of the wolves affect populations of game species such as elk and deer. Furthermore, ranchers in the vicinity of the wilderness area are affected by wolf predation of their livestock. Wolves are opportunistic hunters and will prey on the resources available to them. Therefore, livestock often becomes vulnerable to attack. These issues and more are what the wilderness and wildlife managers are tasked with addressing. The Wilderness Act of 1964 provides guidelines for officials to follow and pertain only to the Frank Church Wilderness area itself. In 1964, Congress passed the Wilderness Act. This legislation created a national wilderness preservation system with a mandate to preserve areas where Earth and its community of life are untrammeled by man, where man himself is a visitor who does not remain. Wilderness is an area of undeveloped federal land retaining its primeval character, which is protected and managed so as to preserve its natural conditions and which has been affected primarily by the forces of nature, with the imprint of man's work substantially unnoticeable. In 1995 and 96, 35 gray wolves were released into the Frank Church Wilderness. The introduction was very successful, and in 2002 a wolf conservation and management plan was passed in the Idaho State Legislature. This management plan has sparked 2 lawsuits. In 2010, the USDA Forest Service authorized use of helicopters to dart and collar wolves inhabiting the wilderness. Shortly thereafter, 2 nonprofits filed suit arguing the use of helicopters is not necessary because wolves had thrived without such intrusions. However, the federal courts upheld the Forest Service permit, concluding that the collaring project and its use of helicopters is sufficiently limited and focused on restoring the wilderness character of the area within the phrase necessary to meet minimum requirements for the administration of the area found in the Wilderness Act. In July 2014, another court battle occurred involving the Frank Church Wilderness regarding the hunting of wolves within the park boundaries. Faced with a legal challenge by conservationists, the Idaho Department of Fish and Game discarded its plan to resume wolf hunting program during the coming winter. Timothy Preseo, the attorney representing the plaintiff Earth Justice, said, "As we mark the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act this September, we are relieved that the Frank Church Wilderness will be managed as a wild place rather than an elk farm for at least the coming year. Now we must make sure the wilderness values prevail for the long term." Management for wolf populations at both state and federal level include similar objectives and strategies. The main objectives are to allow wolf populations to increase to self-sustaining viable populations with free access to their native range, and to ensure that predation on game populations is kept to acceptable levels. Management strategies include the removal of wolves that have become habituated to human presence, are a nuisance, or if there are any unacceptable levels of livestock predation. In setting objectives to minimize adverse impact on other wildlife and game, managers consider opportunities related to hunting and wildlife viewing within the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness. Wolf management strategies include public outreach, addressing nuisance wolves that threaten livestock or humans through extermination or relocation, developing wolf tracking programs using GPS collars, and establishing a communication system for the public to report wolf sightings. Public outreach helps to engage citizens in the decision-making process as well as addressing questions regarding wolf management. Wilderness users see the efforts of public outreach and education campaigns when they view posted regulations, warnings, and information at trailheads or trail guides from ranger stations. The Frank Church Wilderness is unique in that the wilderness area is managed by the U.S. Forest Service, but Idaho Fish and Game implements the wolf management program. Hunting has always been a main factor in local and state support of the Frank Church Wilderness. After wolves were introduced, Idaho Fish and Game implemented its own wolf management program with the approval and cooperation of the Forest Service. Once wolves were delisted as endangered, Idaho listed them as big game and permitted hunting. They found that wolf predation was adversely affecting elk and other game populations. In response, they implemented a wolf reduction program where entire packs were allowed to be exterminated. Defenders of Wildlife, Western Watershed Project, and Wilderness Watch joined forces and filed lawsuit against Idaho Fish and Game, stating that heavy-handed wolf reduction program alters wilderness character. The government agreed to desist, allowing for further research and analysis. Gray wolves that inhabit Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness were relisted as endangered species in September 2014. For the time being, protection continues so populations can rebound. Success of these strategies has yet to be determined, but relisting the wolves as endangered may encourage management to pursue non-lethal alternatives such as relocation of the wolves. If the wolves are delisted again, management strategy will likely change once more. Our solutions include continued public education campaigns, continued research, and outreach programs that include town hall meetings. The more the public is engaged, the more they can hopefully work together with wilderness managers to create a plan that observes the directives of the Wilderness Act, yet still satisfies the many and varied stakeholders. Tracking and analysis along with communications plans for both wolf sightings and reporting nuisance wolves are key to understanding and managing the long-term health and viability of the gray wolf in the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness. Thank you.